You are welcome to the world of cotton and America. Today, cotton is one of the most widely used natural materials in the world. It is found in everyday clothing, medical supplies, household textiles, and global manufacturing chains. Entire industries depend on it, and billions of dollars move through the global economy each year because of cotton production and trade. It is in fact so common, so normalized, that its presence is rarely questioned. But before cotton became a symbol of wealth and global utility, it was watered, sadly, by the sweat of a people who were never meant to be free. The truth is, if you don't understand cotton, you don't understand America. Not its wealth, not its power, not its global influence. This empire, known as the Cotton Kingdom, did not merely grow crops. It reshaped continents, dictated global trade, funded industrial revolutions, distorted political systems, and left scars that remain embedded in modern inequalities. Cotton was not just fabric. It was finance, diplomacy, law, violence, and domination woven into one vast machine. But how did this kingdom truly function? What invisible systems allowed raw plants in American soil to become gold in European markets? And how did slavery transform from an inherited social system into one of the most ruthlessly efficient economic models in history? To understand this, in this video, we enter the cotton fields not as observers, but as witnesses, tracing the threads from the soil to the ship, from the whip to the bank ledger, from plantation cabins to factory smokestacks, thousands of miles away. This is not just a story about farming or fabric. It is a story about how America was built, who paid the price, and why the legacy of cotton still echoes through the world today. As we explore these mind-bugging events, do take a moment to support our work.
On the unjust deaths of 100 African Americans by police. If you missed the part 1, you can check through our channel and discover unarmed African Americans that have met their deaths due to simple police encounters. In this video, we will continue to remember and honor the black men and women we have lost by telling their stories. By doing this, we keep their memories alive and work towards a future where everyone is treated fairly. Before we get right into the video, please smash the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the other parts of the series. Number 90, Herman Whitfield, April 2022. On April 25th, 2022, Herman Whitfield was experiencing a mental health crisis at his parents' home. His mother called for an ambulance, but 6 Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department officers showed up instead. Without any threat or provocation, IMPD officers electrocuted Whitfield with a taser, tackled and double handcuffed him in the prone position, ignored his cries that he could not breathe, and suffocated him face down for approximately 5 minutes until he was motionless on his parents' living room floor. After killing Whitfield, IMPD further victimized his parents. IMPD officers ordered Whitfield's parents not to leave their home to follow the ambulance to the hospital to see about their son. Officers searched their home within minutes of killing Whitfield, and without a warrant. And IMPD officers threatened to arrest Herman's mother simply because she objected to a search of their home. In July 2022, the results of an autopsy for Whitfield determined his death was a homicide, and further ruled he died from heart failure while under law enforcement restraint. It took almost a year for the grand jury to indict 2 of the 6 police officers that killed Whitfield. However, these men who are facing criminal charges are still officers of the law in the IMPD. Number 89. Patrick Lyoya, April 2022. Patrick Lyoya was a refugee from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, who fled the country with his family after experiencing years of violence in the Kivu conflict. In 2014, the father of 2 in his family received asylum in the United States, only for Lyoya to lose his life 8 years later. On April 4th, 2022, Officer Christopher Schur would pull Lyoya over for having an improper vehicle registration. At the time, Lyoya was on probation and his license had been revoked for a 3rd time. Lyoya would exit his vehicle and make a run for it, leading to a foot chase. After Lyoya began to flee the scene, Schur attempted to detain him, firing a taser at Lyoya twice and missing both times. A struggle will ensue between the police officer and Lyoya, who tried to take possession of the taser. The struggle for Schur's taser lasts about 90 seconds. and ends with Lyoya facing prone on the ground and Schur atop him, his chest pressed against Lyoya's back. Schur shouts for Lyoya to drop the taser at least 5 times and then draws his gun, presses it to the back of Lyoya's head, and with a final warning shoots Lyoya in the back of the head. On June 9, 2022, Schur was charged with second-degree murder, alleging that the death was intentional and not justified as self-defense, facing up to life in prison with the possibility of parole if convicted. Number 88, Donald Rochester, February 2022. Donald Rochester was just 18 years old before he lost his life in what would be described as premeditated murder. On February 19, 2022, police noticed Rochester's car and ran the license plate, and it came back with an outstanding warrant for a failure to appear in court. The charge for that court date he didn't show up to was carjacking. The officers tried to stop the car and at some point turned their lights and siren on, but the driver fled and officers lost sight of it. They found the car and Rochester on foot near Chilton Street, but Rochester ran back to the car when officers approached. As officers ran toward the car, it began moving toward Officer Connor Murray, who, along with Officer Robert Morey, fired their weapons at the car, hitting Rochester, who died at a hospital. The evidence showed that the police officers shot and killed Rochester even though he was not a threat, and there was no way he would have harmed or injured the officers. The killing of Donald Rochester by Baltimore police officers Morey and Murray has been handled the way most police shootings have been handled in the U.S. No charges were pressed, and the Rochester's death has been swept under the rug. Number 87, Robert Jr. Langley, February 2022. Robert Jr. Langley would lose his life in one of the cruelest ways possible, to a trigger-happy police officer with a short fuse. Until his death, Langley was a father, a son, and a brother to many. On February 6, 2022, Hemingway police officer Cassandra Dollard tried to pull over Robert Jr. Langley for running a stop sign, and it turned into a chase where Langley was driving more than 100 miles per hour. Langley crashed his car in a ditch in rural Georgetown County and was trying to get out the passenger door when Dollard shot him in the chest. Dollard would claim that she feared for her life and acted on a threat. However, Langley didn't have any arrest warrants and made no action that would have led the officer to fear she was going to be killed. He had no weapons in his possessions or uttered any words before his life was unjustly snuffed out. Langley's death not only reveals the unprofessionalism of the police department, but also its incompetence. After his death, investigation revealed Dollard's history of misconduct, which include failing to call in stops or document encounters, improperly using her blue lights, striking the vehicle of a mother and small child after becoming frustrated and visibly angry, as well as discharging her duty weapon and striking a dog while jogging off duty. Despite this history of misconduct, the SCCJ recertified Dollard and the Hemingway Police Department hired her. While Dollard would be charged with manslaughter for the death of Langley, justice remains to be served. Number 86, James Lowry, December 2021. On the night of December 26, 2021, a Titusville police officer shot and killed a man mistaken as a suspect in a domestic incident. That man was James Lowry, an African-American whose case of mistaken identity would lead to the end of his life. Officer Joshua Payne was one of the officers who responded to a violent domestic call along Gale Avenue after receiving a tip that someone was beating up a woman in the road. When he arrived at the scene, he mistaken Lowry as the suspect that matched the description he was given. When Payne attempted to stop Lowry, he took to his heels, leading to a foot chase that went on for several blocks. While Lowry was not the suspect, he chose to run from Payne because of the illegal drugs he had in his possession. During the chase, Payne reportedly tried to stop him by using his taser, but would draw his gun later on. Lowry jumped over a fence and Payne followed behind, while holding his taser in one hand and his gun in the other, and fired one round, killing Lowry. Lowry was unarmed during the altercation, and according to investigation, there was no justification for the use of deadly force. The death of Lowry was just another tragedy that continues to show how police officers are quick to pull the trigger when facing black individuals. Payne was placed on unpaid suspension after the incident, but was later arrested on a manslaughter charge in Lowry's death. We all await justice on the death of James Lowry. Number 85, Terrence Caffey, December 2021. Shooting deaths and beatings are certainly a more outward show of violence against black people, but those two examples don't max out the list of ways that police enact potentially fatal behavior that would end black lives. Lawrence Caffey of Little Rock, Arkansas, died on December 21st, 2021, after being apprehended following a fight with employees at a local movie theater. According to reports, Caffey, armed with only his hands and feet, attacked several employees and an off-duty sheriff's deputy. After finally subduing him alongside responding officers, Caffey was dragged outside where body camera footage shows him resisting and having to be subdued once more. At this point, several officers hold Caffey down, with one putting his hand on Caffey's neck and another kneeling on his back. Caffey was restrained on the ground for approximately 8 minutes before he was placed in the back of a patrol vehicle. At this point, despite not showing much sign of life, Caffey was still conscious but clearly laboring. 3 minutes passed before he was given medical attention by fire rescue responders who noted that Caffey was no longer breathing. Only at this point did emergency life-saving procedures begin. The fire rescue responders would try to resuscitate him, but he never recovered. A medical examination would reveal that Caffey died due to a rare sickle cell trait that became active during the arrest and physical restraint. His death would be ruled as a homicide. However, no officers would be charged for the death of Caffey, which would be ultimate act of injustice to this family. Number 84, Quadri Sanders, December 2021. The murder of Quadri Sanders is another testament to the brutality of American police when it comes to unarmed black individuals. Like every other story, Sandar's case was that of a simple 911 call that turned out to be the end of his life. Before his death, Sanders was a father of 8 and a talented musician who posed no threat to the officers. On December 5th, 2021, officers responded to a 911 call on an alleged protective order violation in NW Lincoln Avenue. The caller reported Sanders was waving a gun in the house and wouldn't let a resident leave. Once officers arrived at the home, they set up a perimeter around the house. A sergeant with the Lawton Police Department then began giving Sanders orders using a PA system in a patrol vehicle. Shortly after commands were given, a female resident of the home exited. Sanders was later seen going out the back door of the home, and an officer gave commands to show his hands, which he immediately complied with. He would go back into the house before reappearing from behind a refrigerator with his hands visible, holding a baseball cap. When Sanders moves partially behind the fridge, Officer Hinkle fires 4 times. With his hand above his head, Sanders falls to the ground. When he sits up, Hinkle fires 7 more times. Officer Ronan would also fire 4 times at Sanders, while the LAD would claim that both officers saw Sanders reach into his pocket when he first stepped behind the refrigerator. The investigation showed that no weapon was located on Sanders' body or in the area where he was shot. Sanders was pronounced dead on the way to the hospital with 12 gunshots wounds to several parts of his body. It would take several months before the now former Oklahoma police officers are charged with fire-degree manslaughter in connection with the 2021 fatal shooting of Sanders. Number 83, Michael Craig, October 2021. A beloved Auburn Gresham building custodian called 911 back in October to say his wife had a knife to his throat. But when police arrived, the custodian was the one who was shot and killed. On the morning of October 4th, 2021, Craig called 911 saying his wife had a knife to his neck. Within seconds of entering the apartment, body camera footage shows Officer Alberto Covarrubias drawing a taser and a gun. And while Craig was the one who called for help, he was the one shot and killed. In the graphic video footage, screams can be heard as the officer takes a couple of steps and fires both his taser and a gun at Craig as he and his wife can be seen fighting and dropping to the ground. Moments later, as he draws closer to the couple who are lying in the doorway of a bathroom, the officer fires a second shot at Craig, ending his life. Shocking information revealed by the Chicago Police Department showed that Officer Covarrubias had been suspended in 2016 for actions that included threatening a fellow cop, and that the suspension lasted about 3 months. The officer was reinstated after seeking treatment for a drinking problem. The story of Michael Craig remains one of the most shocking acts of police violence. Craig was desperate for help from police, but he was the one who ended up dead. While Craig's wife would be charged for stabbing the custodian, Officer Covarrubias would remain with the Chicago Police Department pending an investigation. This remains one of the most audacious forms of injustice in the killing of a black man that cried for help. Number 82, Lindani Mayenev, April 2021. On April 14, 2021, Honolulu police shot Lindani Mayeni dead and claimed that they were responding to a 911 burglary call. However, However, this was just another case of police officers being motivated by racial discrimination against an unarmed black man. Evidence from released video footage showed that Lindani Mayeni intended to go to the Ikison temple, but he was at the wrong address next door. The doorbell video shows a couple walking into the building, followed by Mayeni wearing his traditional ceremonial Zulu headband that he would wear to visit a spiritual place like a church or temple. Moments later, a person in Nuuanu called the Honolulu Police Department, HPD, to say that someone was entering the caller's house. 5 minutes into the call, at which point Mayeni seems to have left the house, 3 HPD police officers arrived. They approached him in the dark driveway and ordered him to get on the ground, and he subsequently attacked them while asking twice who they were. The police officers refused to identify or announce themselves, but instead deployed a taser. As Mayeni continued to fight, they shot and killed him. The tragic death of Mayeni would only be made worse by lies in the statement of the police. The day after the killing, Chief of Police Susan Ballard told the press that officers responded to a reported burglary. 2 days after the killing, Acting Deputy Chief Alan Nagata said that the 3 involved officers were very brave and they fought for their lives, adding that the shooting was not a case of overreaction. The officers involved in his murder would not be charged. At the time of his death, Mayeni was a husband and a father of 2. Number 81, Dominique Williams and James Lionel Johnson, April 2021. Dominique Williams and James Lionel Johnson were both victims of what could be described as an unnecessary use of violence. On April 7, 2021, off-duty Pentagon officer David Dixon claimed he had seen what he thought was a car being broken into and engaged the suspects. The people tried to drive away and he fired at them. Shortly afterward, Williams and Johnson arrived at the hospital with gunshot wounds and died from their injuries. There are no other details known about the case, except for the fact that Dixon shot both of them in the back. The story remains a clear case of abuse of power, as Dixon had no authority in Montgomery County, and there were no laws that required the use of deadly force for property crimes. In addition to that, Dixon had no proof the men were committing any crimes. Dixon would be charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of using a handgun in commission of a felony, and reckless endangerment. Police brutality against black individuals is not a recent phenomenon. It is deeply rooted in racism and discrimination that has persisted throughout history. Regardless of being unarmed or innocent, the treatment suffered by African Americans at the hands of law enforcement remains consistent and unjust. It is a heartbreaking truth that thousands of black men and women have lost their lives to the brutality, hatred, and discrimination propagated by some members of the police force. Their names may fade from the headlines, but their stories should never be forgotten. We owe it to them to ensure their voices are heard and their memories are honored. In the next part of this series, we will continue to share the stories of more African Americans whose lives were unjustly taken and their voices silenced. As always, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos to let more people know the truth about blacks and to hear their own part of the narratives. Thanks for watching.
While you're going about your week making coffee, checking your phone, living your life, something happened on March 25th, 2026, that your pastor has not preached about yet, that the evening news barely covered, that most of your family group chats have not processed. 123 nations stood in the United Nations General Assembly and declared with a formal vote that the trafficking and enslavement of African people was the gravest crime against humanity in the history of the world. 123 nations. Now I need you to hear what I am about to say very carefully, because most people are going to look at that vote and call it politics. They are going to call it symbolic. They are going to debate whether it is binding, whether it matters, whether anything will actually change. But I am not here to talk about politics. I am here to show you what that vote actually was in the language of Scripture, in the framework of prophecy, in the architecture of a book that was written thousands of years before the United Nations existed. Because the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob does not work through coincidence. He works through patterns. And this pattern, this specific moment, was written before any of us were born. Stay with me until the end of this video. Because what I am going to show you about March the 25th, 2026 will change how you read every promise in your Bible, every prayer your grandmother ever prayed, and every morning you have ever woken up wondering if God was paying attention. He was keeping a ledger. And on March the 25th, he began reading it aloud. Let me ask you something. When was the last time the world acknowledged what happened to your people? Not a movie, not a museum exhibit, not a feel-good speech during Black History Month that disappears on March 1st. A formal, global declaration. 123 nations looked at generations of documented suffering and said out loud on record before the entire world that what was done to African people was the gravest crime against humanity ever committed. The gravest, not one of the worst. The gravest. Let that sink in. But here is what most people are missing completely. They are debating the politics. They are arguing about whether the resolution is binding. They are watching the United States, Israel, and Argentina cast their 3 votes against it and calling it a failure. They are reading the wrong document. Because the real document, the one that matters, was not written in New York. It was not written in 2026. It was not written in any language the United Nations recognizes. It was written in Hebrew, thousands of years ago, by a God who told his prophet exactly what this moment would look like before a single nation-state existed. And that document has a name. It is called the Ledger. Amos chapter 8, verses 4 through 7. Read it slowly. Hear this, you who trample the needy and do away with the poor of the land. You who make the ephah small and the shekel large and cheat with dishonest scales. The Lord has sworn by himself, the pride of Jacob, I will never forget any of their deeds. I will never forget. That is not poetry. That is bookkeeping. The God of Israel keeps records. He does not miss entries. He does not lose pages. He does not forget deeds that were done in darkness aboard ships that crossed the Atlantic in the dead of night, on auction blocks where human beings were sold like livestock. I will never forget any of their deeds. 12 million people, 12 million names, 12 million stories, torn from the continent where civilization began, forced across an ocean, in conditions that defied human comprehension, and put to work building the wealthiest economic system the modern world has ever seen. Without compensation, without acknowledgement, without a record in any human archive, but not without a record in heaven's archive. The God of Amos was watching, writing, entering every transaction into a ledger that no empire could seal, no council could redact, no institution could bury. And for generations, your people prayed to that God. Your grandmothers prayed. Their grandmothers prayed. Generations of people who had every reason to believe heaven had gone silent prayed anyway. Why? Because something in their spirit knew. The ledger was still open. The accounting was not finished. March 25th, 2026. The ledger began to be read aloud. Here's the history nobody teaches in full. 1865. The Civil War ends. Slavery is abolished. And a Union general named William Sherman issues Special Field Order Number 15. 40 acres, a mule. Land along the southeastern coast to be redistributed to freed families. Within months, President Andrew Johnson reversed it. The land went back to the former enslavers. Freedom without resources is not liberation. It is abandonment. 1964, the Civil Rights Act passes. Landmark legislation, a genuine milestone. But study the economics of what followed, and you will find that the wealth gap did not close. According to Federal Reserve data, in 1963, the median black family held approximately 5 cents of wealth, for every dollar held by the most affluent demographic in America. In 2023, 60 years later, that number had barely moved. Approximately 15 cents on the dollar. 60 years of legal progress. 15 cents. 60 years of progress. 15 cents. H.R. 40. The bill to study reparations, introduced in Congress every single year since 1989. 37 consecutive years.